start.
So, Jason.
Keep talking to the microphone, please, folks.
I apologize.
Honestly.
Sorry, we're an amateur operation. But Jason and I worked at Playback STL, and I was in charge of the graphic ink section. So that there was 3 different comics that we were working on. I had my own comic, Potential Orchestra Guy, Kevin Wolf's Pangea, and there was My Awesome Life and a couple other ones. And so a few of us started just getting together once a month to draw and kind of go over some of the ideas that we had and just get together and talk comics. And then, Jason got involved and a couple of writers got involved. And then from there, it kind of snowballed to about 8 people. And we had Project Comic Con coming up in October 2010, I guess. And so we thought, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if we put together a book kind of featuring all of our stories, because we were always working on different stories, but everybody was working on them separately. I'm working on a graphic novel or forestry miniseries, and Jason's working on something else. And so what if we had just like a little short stories and everybody kind of contributed, did it all at once. And so the idea of Spirits of St. Louis came about because Halloween was in October and we thought it was good, and we just kind of ran with it. So yeah.
Excellent. So that's how I know you and Jason kind of had met each other previously. How did you bring Steve into it? Was he just like some homeless guy you found stealing hubcaps, or how did he get involved in the process?
The Jason Todd origin of yeah, I knew Jason. I was a writer for the comic section doing reviews for Playback, and I think actually just via Star Clipper. We had met a couple of times too, and I was doing my own mini comics at the time, which were basically short stories, and so finding out that people were putting a compilation of short stories together, and like, okay, I want to be a part of that. So I started coming to the Ink and Drinks and contributed to the first book. I think I didn't actually meet you, Carlos, until Project Comic Con. I don't know that I'd been to a meeting, but I did contribute to the first book. And then it kind of gradually grew from there. Originally there was a third editor, not me, Brian Hollerback, but he moved and couldn't commit as much time to the group anymore, and so they asked me if I wanted to step in. So that was, what, Tanked, or was that Hammered? Like third,
it was Hammered, which is the only book that somebody on the Brian wrote the intro for. Because he had just left, I'm like, oh, I guess I'll do it.
That's it. But yeah, that's how I met the guys and got involved, and then my role kind of grew just because I didn't go away, basically.
Yeah. No matter how much Jason and Carlos asked, you
right.
just stayed.
Right.
Yeah, well, we keep him around too because, when we say editor, we do literally copy edit things, right? So when we needed somebody who knows where to put the commas, we went to the English professor, which is
right.
his day job. So.
Now, you guys each, before you started the intern, you had your individual comics. I know, Carlos, you had Potential Orchestra Guy, and you just released a compilation, right? What was that?
Yeah, a couple years ago, we released a trade paperback compiling the entire new series. So that ran, I think, initially ran in Playback is sort of one-shots, and then I expanded the story out to a 3-issue miniseries in 2008, and then there was about a year and a half gap between the last one coming out in 2011.
You had a Kickstarter for it, and I think that was even featured in USA Today, right? Did they do a thing about
that? So it somehow got picked up in the USA Today pop culture blog.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's amazing how something like that will help you get funded pretty quickly. So.
And Steve, yours is called Myriad.
Yeah, right? Myriad. It was originally basically I knew I couldn't find an artist that was willing to work with me long form to come up with, because I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to do for longer form comics, but getting somebody to commit for no money can be difficult sometimes. So I was like, hey, well, could you do like an 8-page story for me? Could you do a 12-page story for me? And that worked out a lot better. So that's kind of what my early mini comics were. First issue, second issue, third issue, they're not related to each other at all. You can just grab one and read it and stand alone, basically.
Just it's a series, but it's a set. Each is just like a standalone, its own themes, and
right.
And you also had eventually had your own book, but didn't you also have your own publishing?
Yeah, my comics before Ink and Drink, I was part of a group called Low Key Comics that we actually all met each other on the internet. Which Carlos likes to make fun of me for that, but it was a community of people who were all fans of Eric Larson's comic Savage Dragon, Not that I make comics that are much like Savage Dragon at all, but like he's always been an inspiration to me anyway, because he's such a champion of creators' rights and founding Image and discovering new talent and that kind of thing. And so like a group of us started basically doing what Ink and Drink did later. I mean, our thought was, hey, we all live in all these separate cities. Let's do a compilation of stories together, and we'll sell it where we live, and we'll have more reach than we would individually. It didn't quite work out as well as Ink and Drink worked out because the theme was just, hey, we're a bunch of guys that are friends that did a comic together. That's not as much of a selling point as, hey, we're local artists all from St. Louis, more of a selling point there. So yeah, I've done quite a bit of stuff through Low Key, and a lot of it ended up being short stories because, as Steve said, that's the easiest way to get people to commit to things. I had at least 3 different longer form series that got to the script phase and the artist drawing half or more of the first issue before disappearing. So like I wrote a lot of comics that nobody ever saw because they never got finished. So I was pretty dejected when we started. Before we came up with the idea for Ink and Drink, and I was really excited to have a new outlet because I hadn't put out anything in probably a year and a half.
So when you talked about your previous publishing experience, like having a different group before Ink and Drink, what was the difference between what happened with that first group, how it didn't progress as far as you wanted, and how Ink and Drink is kind of doing pretty well with releasing books twice a year? What's the difference? What makes the Ink and Drink process work as opposed to earlier efforts?
I think it's 2 things. I think just the concept of Ink and Drink, the jokey titles and the camaraderie of like, hey, we're a bunch of people who just get.
You guys do drink a lot.
We do drink a lot.
It's almost insufferable at times. I don't know how you finish books.
Yeah, but that's
barely functioning alcoholics is the word I like to
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Ink and Drink, it's who we are and it's what we do.
Luscious.
But the other thing too is consistency. So like that other group, we put out single issue comics. Some were anthologies, some weren't. There were a lot of first issues without second issues. And it's very hard to build momentum if you're not regularly releasing a product. And after we did the first book, Spirits of St. Louis, and we're like, that was really good. Hey, there's another convention coming up in the spring. Let's do another one. And let's start working on the next one right now. And like we just set that once every 6 months we're going to do a book, and that's made a huge difference. If we're regularly getting out there in front of people, we're doing events at conventions, signings at Star Clipper, and it's consistently like, hey, we're this group of people from St. Louis and we're really cool, check us out, and word of mouth went around.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there and say I think that a couple things really helped us. One is thematically organizing everything for the genre, so it's like this book is this genre. So whatever story that you're going to do has to be in a horror genre. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a thriller or slasher or whatever. Like horror is very vague, but it has to be somewhat tangentially related to horror. And then also conventions. So we always have these conventions, and we always have specific deadlines for our books to get made for those conventions. So we have drop dead dates, and if you don't submit your story by that date, it's not going to make it. So because there's a lot of people and a lot of stories that we kind of wish would have been in some of our books, but for whatever reasons, deadlines got in the way and they couldn't do it. And so that's fine, but the train has to keep moving on because you have to hit the destination. If not, you're going to show up to a convention without a book. So it's as much as we like to kind of joke around about we're loosey, like it's a loose collective. We're pretty strict with deadlines, and we're pretty strict with making sure that the work gets done on time. And we have editorial oversight. The books have to be up to a certain standard in order for to be included in each of the anthologies. So it is. We do want these books to be presentable and for everyone to pick up the books and really enjoy the final finished product. Have it be a polished finished product that you can take to an editor at a big company and show them and say, hey, here's what we did, here's how we did it. You have printed work. It's not cobbled together mini comics, which we also do, but those are definitely looser. So
it's a great motivator as a creator too, because you want to be a part of what everybody else is doing, and you look at what everybody else is doing, and you're like, oh man, your art has really grown since the last issue. Man, I need to step up my game. I need to keep going and keep trying to improve and keep at it. Again, momentum. It's really about momentum. start rolling downhill and you don't want to stop.
Well, do you think now is better, and I have to backtrack a little bit just to, I have to be totally honest, Carlos, we can't make it words like tangentially. And I only mention that because Wizard Rules, and it's not me, it's just Wizard World, they've got a really clear thing about that kind of words that aren't in the English language. So,
I have been drinking, so
I know you know.
That's just word to word. It's a little bit.
That's okay. So, do you think now is a better time for publishers like this, as far as you know, more conventions and comics being able to be available online? Is this a better time now than maybe it used to be even 10 years ago?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things that helps a publisher of our size is the rise of print on demand, which probably only came into existence, what, 8 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
8, 10 years? Because it used to be, if you wanted to be a small publisher, you had to go to a big book publisher and get 1,000 copies of a book printed and have 800 of them sit in your basement. And you don't have to do that anymore. You can get 100 copies of a book printed and they look just as professional as anything else on the shelf if you know what you're doing and have the right design elements and everything. So that makes a huge difference because we don't have these gigantic sunk costs at the beginning just getting a book to sell, especially when we're churning out so many of them. You know, if we had to order 800 or 1,000 copies of every book for the very first order, we would have huge stacks of inventory to deal with. So.
Yeah.
Is there, for people here that are interested in that, is there like a minimum amount of books that you have to get for?
One.
Really?
One. So
Wow.
if you use printers like Kablam, I think Comics Wellspring, those you can just print one-off items. So the cost of entry really is a lot lower. I mean, obviously, if you just get one comic printed out there, it's going to be a little more expensive than if you get 25 or 100 or 50 or whatnot. But I mean, like Jason said, when we were starting off making comics in like 2003, there weren't a whole lot of options out there for you, and so it was a lot harder to get things out there. So you kind of have to resort to many comics and whatnot.
Yeah, when you talked about being strict with deadlines and everything else, and all the artists and writers that are involved, how many have been involved through the years with the industry?
We've had 83 total contributors over the 10 books. And I did the calculations the other day. I think there's like 15 people that have been in over half of them, but we've had 34 people that have only been in one book. So we have some people that come in for the genre that they're most accustomed to, and we have other people who they were in there for the experimentation of trying to do all of them. And we even had for the kids anthology that we just released at the convention Juice Box, we have 10 new contributors, which I think is really exciting. We've been around this long and still finding people who are interested in what we do and want to get involved in.
Now, for the people that have been involved, hasn't there been anyone that have that's trying to like bigger, not bigger things, but things on more national stage, bigger labels?
And we have, well, first of all, I guess I should say in Homebrew, the book that we did last year for the 250th anniversary of St. Louis, we actually had contributions from 2 people who were already names. Derek Gold, who is a writer for St. Louis Post-Dispatch, did a story that's kind of about Cardinals history in a weird and interesting way, kind of a fantasy story about Cardinals history. And then we had Dan Zeflash, who Eisner nominated, Ignatz award-winning, cartoonist from the St. Louis area, wanted to be a part of it. But we also have had people who have contributed to our books that have gone on to get paying gigs in the industry. We've got Ben Sawyer, for example, who has done a lot of coloring for Zenescope. We've got Marie Anger. She's a colorist now for Dark Horse and Oni. One of our contributors, Brian Atkins, has done stuff on his own with other people who are self-publishing, but now is going to be doing something for IPW soon. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. And we've had quite a few people who created projects. There's one sitting right there. Who they met people at Ink and Drink, and they ended up using that to create their feature projects. Brian Muncie, Alex O'Neill here did a successful Kickstarter for his book Ghost Town. The guy moderating this panel did a Kickstarter for his book The Rough and Tumble, which is due out shortly.
In August, yeah.
And they met their artist Ben Sawyer at one of our meetings, probably 2 years ago, and started working together, kept going. So.
Yeah, that's the great thing about David Drink is just the, you know, before my co-writer and I, Oscar Madrid, got involved, we had no idea there was such a thriving community of original comics artists and writers, you know, and once we met you guys, it just opens the door to so many different people and everything else. It's really amazing. Also on that subject about, you know, the amount of people you have and the versatility, before getting involved with, you know, writing comics, my experience was mostly as someone who buys comics, and it seemed like a very male-dominated world, you know, as far as the professional artists and writers that we see in DC and Marvel and everything else. But with Eat and Drink, it's really versatile. There's, you know, men and women and all kinds of talent. Was that something that was intentional, or was it just like, we don't care what gender you are, if you're good, come on in and let's do stuff?
So I think it wasn't, I mean, it was intentional, but also wasn't. I mean, we reached out to our friends, and so we have a wide diverse group of friends, all of us do. And so we're interested in making comics and who are good artists. And so all of our friends reached out. I mean, you know, girls, guys, all gender, like I said, all races. And I mean, what we have is just a really diverse crew of people who always contribute. So that, if you pick up any books, you see the diversity of characters, of stories within the books, and that's because it's reflected of the creators of those books. And that's great, and it's one thing that, you know, we love about the first couple books and how everything turned out. It just got bigger and bigger and better and better, and that's awesome because that's kind of who we are as people. So it's nice to see that reflected too.
Well, as far as if there's anyone who's interested in, because I'm asked quite a bit about, you know, how do I get involved with Eat and Drink, or how do we do that? What's the best way to get involved with Eat and Drink, or submitting something, or how does that work?
Well, we meet the third Tuesday of every month at Cicero's on the Loop, if you're familiar with where that is, if you're from the St. Louis area. And it's open to anyone, it really is. We have people walking off the street, like literally sometimes people are hanging out at Cicero's and pop in and are like, what are you guys doing back here? And we tell them and then they hang out for a while. Yeah, we have like in the back room that we have reserved for us the third Tuesday of every month, 8 p.m. until they make us leave.
Does that ever happen where they say, you guys, honestly, you're just too crazy drunk? Does it happen?
Like every month, yes. Like Jason and I are usually there until 1 o'clock, and they're like, we're closing now. We want to go home. Get out of here.
And you guys will talk to anybody, which I guess is how troubles get involved initially, right?
Yeah. And we have this guy who's homeless. No. No, but
I was talking to myself, and then someone overheard me.
Well, we thought he was talking to us when we answered his question, but no. But yeah, honestly, anybody is welcome to come to a meeting and see what we're doing and talk to us about what we're doing, talk to us about what they're doing. The next month's meeting, we just had our May meeting, so our June meeting is June 16th, 8 p.m. Cicero's, and yeah, and everybody's welcome.
People always ask us questions, especially like online on Facebook and whatnot. Like, how should I format my script? How should I format my pages? Et cetera, et cetera. And you know, what we always tell them, I mean, they can, a lot of times we answer via email, but if they come to the meetings, it's better to walk you through some of those things. I know, like, you and Oscar had questions about script because you went to movie scripts, and so I gave Oscar some of my scripts and I told him how to break it down. A good estimate is if I have like 4 to 6 panels. That's maximum action. You don't want to have like 23 panels on one page. The artist is going to hate you. Things like that.
Which has happened before.
Which has happened before, yeah. But I mean, it's different because, you know, we've had a couple people who wrote, you know, novels, and they wanted to jump in there, and they delivered a novel, like a 12-page novel. They wanted to make it a script, and the artist was like, I don't know what this is. So then had to kind of go back and walk them through, like, hey, writer, this is not a novel. You need to write this into a script, so you need to break it up. In a script, you need to break out the action, you need to break out the panels.
It's a lot different.
It's a lot different.
Even the like screenplay stuff is a lot different.
Completely different, yeah. So, I mean, and we can always send examples of our scripts or scripts of people who are doing it well. So.
That's what nice about it too, is that when Oscar and I got involved, everyone was so nice that you could just go there and network, and if you need an artist for your story, you can just go and talk to an artist that you like and say, would you be interested in working on this, and show them your script, and it's just very loose, and it's a fun time, for sure. Sure.
Sure, and there's a lot of stories that come out of being at the Inky Drinks that never would have happened if it wasn't people in a room, drinking and letting their inhibitions go. One of my favorites is when we were doing our fantasy anthology. Steve didn't have an artist lined up yet, and
I had an idea for a story, but I eventually realized it wasn't going to fit into our parameters. We always say that it's got to be 8 pages or less, and I knew it wasn't going to work, so I was kind of at a loss. What am I going to do then?
Yeah. So one of the artists that didn't have a writer yet, Jim Mosley,
who's at our table right now, booth 312, I should mention.
They had some Jim Mosley.
The handsome Jim Mosley. He's like, okay, this is the fantasy book. This is going to sound weird, but I want to do a story that involves those like airbrushed fantasy paintings you'll see on the side of vans from the 1970s. Can you do that? And Steve's like, well, I'll try. And so he cooked up this story that it was amazing. It was like about a wizard who's been painted on the side of this minivan, and he talks to the nerdy kid that buys the van and tells him if he agrees to have the spell cast that women will fall on his feet and they'll be all powerful, and so the kid agrees, and then poof, the wizard is free to walk away, and the kid is now a barbarian painting trapped on the side of the van, and yeah, he's got women hanging on his legs and everything, but he's trapped. So
Spoiler alert.
yeah, well, it's a great
4-page story.
Yeah, it's a 4-page story, so I'm not really spoiling that much, but it's a really cool twist, and it's a story that never would have happened if that random conversation hadn't happened after a few drinks before.
And that's a great thing too about Inky Drink is the challenge of it. We've done all kinds of genres: Western, romance. Our next book that we're doing is going to be called Silver, and it's nonfiction, so autobiographical or true crime or historical. It's really kind of across the board. But it challenges you to then think, okay, do I have a horror story in me? Do I have a Western story in me? What would that be? What would I want to do? What do I think what have I heard other people are doing? What can I do that's different from that? And it is a great exercise, creative exercise.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't have to be traditionally in that genre, because Steve had a great story that was in our science fiction book, and it was more like a Twilight Zone type of story, and it was perfect because it fits, right in. It doesn't have to be straight science fiction, aliens, and robots and whatnot.
Yeah, same with the horror book. I mean, there are gory horror stories, there are funny horror stories, there are kind of, again, Twilight Zone, like, creepy twist horror stories. So the variety comes from people's bringing their different skills to the genres, and also just the diversity of the people who are involved. Each book has 10 to 15 stories, and none of them are alike. It's kind of amazing.
That's what's fun about the books, I think, from a writing perspective, is that each book will have a theme, but you can kind of play loose and fancy free with the subject matter. One of the 3 comics we did was for Free Comic Book Day was pirates, right? And me and Ben Sawyer did one about the village people and how they used to have a pirate in there. So it's very kind of loose, but you can do with it. It's really a lot of fun. So right now the books are available in physical form. Are there any plans to move that to the digital end of things?
So we talked about it for right now, not yet. I mean, we talked about it. It's kind of a discussion. We're trying to find a good platform solution for that. Right now, we have everything available at stores around St. Louis and online. We might talk about digital format later, but it's kind of hard because it's like, unless you have the low-res PDF version of things, it's people's artwork, and then you're just kind of giving it out there. And so I don't know. So we're very hesitant because of that, to have a digital form, and there's not a good way to get them all in like Comixology or whatnot.
Physical is better anyway.
Yeah.
Well, out of all the issues released so far, individually, what's the favorite? What's your favorite, each one of you, of all the books?
Mine, and it surprised me when it came out, the Western. I'm not a big Western fan, but I think that particular one is like all killer, no filler. I love every story in it. And I like to think that that's one of my better stories as well in there. Yeah, the Western one for sure. And it depresses me because that's the lowest selling book we've done. because just people look at it like, ah, cowboys, whatever, you know. But I thought it was great.
It's a good book, yeah.
I guess I would go with On the Rocks, which is our romance anthology, which again, you would think, really, romance comics? But a lot of people did a lot of different things with the romance book. You know, we have some stories that are really sweet about couples that are getting together for the first time. One of the stories in it, for example, are Jim Mosley, who we mentioned again, he's at the booth for us right now. He did a story about how he and his wife met and started dating. Elizabeth Schweitzer, who's also at our booth right now, she did a story about this girl who's been unlucky in love for years. She's an adult and kind of had trouble finding somebody. She remembers who her childhood crush was, who moved away, and the two of them happen to meet again now that they're adults, and kind of what happens there. This guy had a really interesting story. I don't want to give away the twist ending too, but in the romance anthology, it's like a take on a good 50s romance, but a little different, little bit of a twist to it. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting, and it was kind of, again, all across the board, very, very different interpretations of love and what that meant. So
I'm not surprised about that, because I've always felt that out of all the ink and drink editors, you've been the most romantic. If I can say that, I don't care who hears it. You know what I'm talking about. I think I've always felt that way, so that's awesome. Pros?
I think each book is the best as far as like the quality of art and story goes. So Juice Box is the best, but before that I thought that the Liquid Courage, the superhero book, was the best. But personally, my favorite is our science fiction book, and that's for a lot of reasons. I think there's some really strong, cool sci-fi stories. I love science fiction as a whole, but also my friend Brad, him and my other buddy Nate, they were working on a story. Unfortunately, he had a heart attack and passed away, and so so I was able to kind of work with my buddy Nate to help finish the story, because he had 2 or 3 of the pages already sketched out, and he had some of his artwork and stuff been made for that. So I was able to take that and just sort of shape it based on the conversations, and like, because we had talked about it a lot, and so finish that for him. And, you know, I gave the pages to his.
I didn't know that. So was some of the original artwork of your friend who had passed away, was that you actually used in the story?
Yeah, we scanned it and used it
very
for
cool.
some of the pages, so that was cool. And then the main character, we changed his name to Captain King, because his name was Brad King, and so we changed his name to Captain King, and he looked like Brad. But Brad took a lot of steroids and was in the army. So. Brad was not is in good shape as that guy. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Can you talk about the next book at all? I know Juice Box is just released, but can you?
yeah, let me talk a little about Juice Box, and I'll let you talk about Silver. Juice Box is our book that we debuted at the convention. Like literally, we got it back from the printers on Monday, and you guys are the first audience where you're selling it to. It is an all ages anthology, so because every year we get approached by people with children. Hey, what do you have for little Billy here, little Susie? And we're like, nothing. Yeah, there's all kinds of swear words and violence and horrible stuff in this. And like, what are we gonna do?
Look at what came up while you're talking.
Yeah, point blank, a bear, and gnawing on that. That's it. That's great. And I love that story too. That's a great story, but not age appropriate.
And the guy shirt says Teen Jacob.
But Juice Box was kind of our way to then reach out to that audience of kids that always are interested in what we're doing and love to look at the art, but if they could read, if they could see the subject matter, their parents would be like, no, this is bad. So Juice Box is full color, digest sized. It's normally cover price $10. We're selling it for $8 at the con, booth 312.
And it's actually got activities, right?
Yeah, we have coloring pages, we have word search, a maze, you know, a couple different little activities for the kids. Yeah. All right, the next book.
Yeah, so our next book is going to be called Sober. The theme of that one is going to be nonfiction. We originally were saying we would do autobiographical, and then we figured that was a little too strict. So nonfiction could also include, you know, biography, you know, historical story, you know, a story from the news, true crime, basically anything that if it happened and it won't get us sued to print it, then it could be in the book. And that's going to be coming out in September. It's going to debut at Small Press Expo out in Bethesda, Maryland, which is like the big independent comics convention. So we're really excited. This is our first time tabling there. I think we're going to do pretty well. But deadline for that will be August 1st, and it'll be out at the end of September. So.
And then we'll debut it here in St. Louis, October 14th and 15th at Project Comic Con, which is the smaller convention they do at the Westport, which this year looks to be a really good convention, actually. They got a lot of great artists that are going to come to it. So.
Well, has that ever happened as far as, you talked about being sued, but has that ever happened, or do you have something in place where you say, you can't do this, you can't do that?
We have had to turn down or suggest edits to people for things that we were a little worried about.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the Cardinals story that's in Homebrew, we made sure that there aren't any Cardinals logos in it because, you know, it's okay to mention that the Cardinals exist, but that registered trademark of the logo without asking for permission to use it can get you in trouble.
You actually, I think, you were about, we had a story, there's
I was just about to mention that.
Ed Brown, you want to say that?
No, I was just about to say that Jim did a story featuring
Ed Brown, he's the lawyer with the eye patch.
Yeah. So having a story about a lawyer with an eye patch and the things that the lawyer with the eye patch does in that story, like she has a gun in there, right? and all sorts of stuff. I was like, I don't know about this thing. No, he's cool with it. He's cool with it. So yeah, we wanted to make sure. I think he signed something for us, right?
He did, yeah. He actually, he's a friend of mine from a while back. We like see movies together and stuff. And I said, I wanted to do a story about you because everyone in St. Louis knows who you are with the eye patch, and it's your wacky commercials with it, right? And but I said, we're going to make a lot of fun of your one eye. And you got one eye. And it's like, oh yeah, sure, it'd be great. And he was totally game for all of it, you know. So. You know, but I still had to sign something that said,
yeah.
And he had to sign something.
He had to sign something, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you also did a story that is the Detroit Rock Army.
Detroit Rock Soldiers.
Yeah.
No, Detroit Rock Army.
Okay.
I think it was Soldiers.
I don't know.
Soldiers are cool, but you know, it's basically about fans of Kiss, but
yeah.
we didn't ever mention Kiss, and we didn't. And again, we're very careful not to infringe on trademarks or anything.
That probably would have gotten us in trouble. Probably.
There's a one-page story in Juicebox that I was a little bit worried was going to get us in trouble because it's about a little girl who has a cardboard box and she's playing with it as if it's the TARDIS, and she's playing with it as if it's the firehouse from Ghostbusters, and it's pretty recognizable. But again, it's not in an infringing kind of way. It's just a little girl's imagination, imagining all these different things. I think that we're in the clear on that too.
Yeah, and I know Derek Gold showed his story to I think Bill DeWitt at the Cardinals and a couple other people, and they liked it. So
that's cool.
And we didn't get a letter from their lawyer afterwards, so we're in the clear.
I guess if it's out there in pop culture, it's to be expected that there's going to be some references made, and you know whether it's the TARDIS or the Cardinals or a lawyer with an eye patch that makes weird commercials.
It's all for security purposes, right?
Yeah, we do have the boilerplate, you know, legal statement that everything is, you know, not real or used with satiric intent. So
yeah,
cover ourselves a little bit that way.
Are there any questions anybody might have about Injury Comics or how to get involved or any of that stuff?
We got about 10 minutes left, so.
Yeah. When you submit, do you need to have your artist already? You mentioned people submitting scripts to you. As a writer, can you submit a script and then will that get passed around to artists, or do you need to find your own artist?
Yeah, we usually, if you have a script and you just submit a script to us, we'll forward it around to any artist. Like sometimes we'll know what artists are looking for something like, hey, I don't have a story, I want to be in the next book, do you have anything? And we'll forward that on to the artist, or just sort of we'll arrange those things sometimes. And sometimes we'll just kind of like email like 3 or 4 artists and say, hey, here's a script about XYZ, this guy's looking for an artist, here's his email, contact him, you know, see if whoever wants to work on it.
Those are sisters, right? That's
yeah, probably the easiest way to do it is at actual meetings, and that's what tends to happen. Is people say, I want to be involved. Do you have an idea? Yeah, I have an idea. I haven't found anyone to try it.
It's nice because you can talk to them right there, and you talk about your story with the little story points, and you know, this is cool.
I should mention, we are pretty much open submission. Our guidelines are that if you have never submitted to one of our books before, you're limited to 4 pages. You can have a 5th if you do like a title page, like a 1-page kind of image that introduces your story. If you have already contributed to our books in some way in the past, then it's 8 or 9 if you include a title page.
Yeah, and we do that because a lot of people's very first comic book making experience is with us, and we've done it enough times to know, like, if you've never done it before and you bring on an 8-page deadline, you're gonna freak out a little bit. It's a lot to chew off, making sure that you get something, especially on the artist side with formatting the pages properly and all that. So making sure that you can do it, you get used to the process before you bite off more than you can chew. So.
It was a little easier in the past because we were just black and white, but with Homebrew was the first full color. We realized, we switched printers a while back, and we realized that our new printer, was printing our stuff in color just to get the images at the right resolution. And we were doing black and white comics, and we're like, well, if you're printing it in color, can we do it in color then? And they're like, yeah, it's the same price. So I'm like, okay, yeah, so we switched to color. But that adds time. You know, you not only have to, if you're a writer who's going to pass on the script to somebody else, you have to give enough time to the artist to draw and to color, and then maybe somebody else, usually Jason, to letter the stories too. So yeah, you need a little bit more time.
Cool. Can you guys talk about anything you've got coming up individually? I know you guys are all working on stuff on your own. Is there anything you want to talk about or bring up?
Sure. So I'm working on a 5-issue miniseries with Jim Mosley called The Baronage. It's set in Prohibition, and it's about the Lent family and sort of gangsters and how, you know, they essentially lost all their money before Prohibition. So that should be fun. The first issue's coming out hopefully in September in time for SPX. And then I'm doing a one-shot called The Ideal, which is expanding on my character that I wrote for the superhero anthology, Look and Courage. So that's going to be 22 pages, and that'll be out. That'll be out also for SPX. And then the 3rd issue of Shorts and Losses should be out next month.
Wow, cool. On your book, the Prohibition book, is Jim Mosley the artist, or is he writing, or how's that?
So yeah, I'm writing and he's drawing.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
I don't have anything. I'm just thinking drinking.
Yeah.
Like,
Now, you have stuff you do online?
oh yeah, I guess I do. I do a daily webcomic called Kitties with Potty Mouths. It's on Tumblr, kittieswithpottymouths.tumblr.com. And I basically just Photoshop pictures of cats saying incredibly rude things. Monday through Wednesday, that's what that is, and then Thursday is an actual comic strip, and then Friday I flip the switch a little, and it's Cuddly Sharks with Kind Hearts on Fridays. So.
And you've been doing that for what, 2 years now? 3 years?
4.
4 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Every day, or Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, the project I've got working on is called Sprawl. I've got the first issue of it over at our booth, and it'll eventually be a 5-issue miniseries. It's a hyper-violent adventure comic set in a post-apocalyptic St. Louis. Kind of born out of the idea of one of our artists, Aaron Ford. He draws just amazing violence. I mean, that's just what he does. And but his stories can sometimes get a little out there. So I was like, I'd like to do something with you that's really structured as kind of more like a big dumb 80s action movie. And he was game for it. And so we started talking about how when they made the John Carpenter's Escape from New York, they needed someplace that looked like New York after the apocalypse, and so they filmed it in St. Louis. So it's like, well, if, you know, St. Louis is bad enough to be that, what if it was a post-apocalyptic St. Louis? What would that look like? And so I imagine like crime running so rampant that they basically just wall off the city and say, if you don't get out, you're stuck. And the people who stay behind, all of the 77 or whatever neighborhoods there are in St. Louis is each its own little walled off fiefdom, and they compete with each other and all this kind of stuff. And a shopkeeper in St. Louis Hills gets murdered, and an old man in the neighborhood decides he's had enough, and he goes on a one-man quest for revenge, just punching the tar out of people as he marches across the city. So it's big and dumb and has a lot of puns in it and gruesome violence, but I think it's pretty cool. So.
Yeah, he's a great artist. He's got his own series he does also, right?
Yes, called CFKU.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a one-man anthology series, a lot of which features Stink Pig, who's kind of like a cross between Jason Voorhees and Bugs Bunny.
That's true.
So, I think we got time for like maybe one more question.
He's like 5 minutes.
Okay, okay.
We have 5 more questions.
Okay, yeah, they're 1 minute.
So Jim, what are you working on?
Well, thank you for asking, Carlos. No, my co-writer and I asked Madrid and artist Ben Sawyer, who also works for Ink and Drink. We met through Ink and Drink. We have an anthology that we just did a Kickstarter for called The Rough and Tumble. And the hardcover comes out in August, and you can pre-order it at roughcomic.com. And if you pre-order the hardcover, you get a digital copy right now. So, roughcomic.com, and that's it. And thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
That was very kind of you.
Yeah, any questions?
Anybody want to make up something? We've got like 3 minutes though.
So I did want to clarify something. I don't know if you guys got the whole drinking anthology. So like all of our titles are drinking puns because we're Ink and Drink Comics. Because it was we boxed ourselves in with that one because we were at sort of we were like, well, we should just call ourselves. We got to call ourselves something. We're gonna call ourselves. Well, let's just Ink and Drink Comics because we're always inking and drawing at the same time. This is before the drink and draw, by the way. So drink and draw really different.
So our first book, Spirits of St. Louis. Second book was Crime, but that was horror. Crime was Shots in the Dark. Then we did Sci-Fi, which was Blasted. Then
the Western, which was Off the Wagon. The Western probably took us longer to come up with a good title than any of the other ones. We had like 6-Shooter and a bunch of titles we weren't really all that in love with. And then somebody just threw out Off the Wagon. It's pretty.
Nickname.
Yes, nickname, that's right. And then we did the Fantasy Anthology, which was called Hammered. The war featured like a barbarian with a giant hammer on the cover. And then the War Anthology, which was Tanked.
And the next one of the anthology is going to be called Bombed. So,
Or maybe Blitzed.
Or Blitz, yeah.
it made around the war again.
Right.
And 5 years.
Yeah. So then came Romance, which is On the Rocks. And then
There they all
oh yeah, there we go. And then the St. Louis themed anthology was Homebrew. The superhero anthology is Liquid Courage. And then to be a little more kid appropriate, our all ages one is called Juice Box. It's got a big cartoon box of juice on the front of it. And then
For Free Comic Day, we'll be on the house. And did you say for Romance on the Rocks?
Yes, you got it.
So, yeah, so we're always coming up with drinking times.
What was the toughest one? Was that the Western one?
The Western was definitely the toughest.
Yeah.
As soon as we got Blasted, we had Blasted, Owen Hammered, and Tanked. Like those all came up on the same night. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if there's no more questions, that concludes our panel. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.